Thank you for coming. I have to admit to you that it's the easiest way to say this. I've always been a passionate person, and sometimes my passion gets in the way of my proclamation. So anyway, I'm going to really work at that and keeping a lid on because I care very deeply about some of the issues that we're going to be talking about. And I
talk about Donald Trump, are you?
Oh no, not about him. Oh yeah. But I wanted to start off with just one piece of scripture. And I'm not going to read the one where Jesus confronts the Pharisees. I'm not going to. Yeah, I'm trying, Jack. I'm not going to go the scripture where Jesus. I know I don't have a microphone though. I don't think so. Or Jesus does a lot of confrontation in his ministry. I mean, that's obvious in the Gospels. But I'm not going to do those right now. What I'd like to start out with is one scripture where Jesus is talking, and he says, "Come to me, all you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you your rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." That's where I got to be because the world makes me crazy. I watch the news and I just get like this. And I've got to get back to this place where I have to take Jesus's yoke upon me because then the burden is light. And I haven't really experienced that yet, but I'm working on it. We're going to go in several different places today, but I wanted to at least begin by thanking John. John Chafee is on the diocesan board, and they were talking about some of the things that were going to happen in this new presidential administration and how the diocese could respond to some of those things. And perhaps John will have something to say a little bit later. But the first thing I have to say is a very current event. Have any of you heard anything about the House Resolution 59 that went before the House this past week? Okay. Let me read to you part of it. I'm not going to read you the whole thing. House Resolution 59 said, expressing the sense of the House of Representatives that the sermon given by the Right Reverend Marianne Edgar Buddy at the National Prayer Service on January 21st, 2025 at the National Cathedral was a display of political activism and condemning its distorted message. Now, I thought to myself, that's quite a statement. And I got along with this a letter from the National UCC Church that says this: this is problematic, as in the condemnation of the bishop by the president. Our country's rich history of religious freedom prohibits elected officials from dictating the message of religious communities. So their characterization of her sermon as distorted is deeply troubling. Amen, brother. Amen is what I'm saying. And see, it gets me fired up. I searched in the Episcopal Church website for a statement. There was none. I searched in the Episcopal Church for a statement on Bishop Buddy. There was none. I'm thinking, what the hell are we doing in the Episcopal Church? I mean, are we not paying attention to what's going on and supporting people who, in fact, represent us? So anyway, I start off with that because, yeah, I guess I do get kind of emotional, and sometimes my emotions get in the way of my proclamation. So I'm wrestling with that. Go ahead.
Resolution 59 passed the House?
It was just introduced on Friday. No. But I mean, even for a resolution like that to be introduced, is incredible, you know?
Who introduced it?
Huh?
Who introduced it?
I don't know. It didn't say.
Josh Breachin from Oklahoma.
Oh, from Oklahoma. Okay.
They probably will just take their tax exempt away from the churches.
I don't know.
Let them try that. You know, I don't think they can do that.
Yeah.
If they do that, it's going to affect everybody, including the evangelicals.
Yeah.
Let them bring it up.
Uh-huh.
And one of the reasons I think that we don't get cohesive messages from the Episcopal Church, I have to say as a diocese or as the national church, is because the church doesn't agree. The church doesn't agree on having a cohesive statement of where it's coming from, because the Episcopal Church is split in terms of where we're coming from. You know, you would think, well, no, this is the gospel. It's painfully obvious. But the fact is, that's not necessarily the case. And what we have always played to in the Episcopal Church is this via media. Well, let's stay in the middle and let's make sure we keep everybody in the conversation so that we can somehow, you know, work through this. And this last week, and I'm going to introduce Teddy's conversation. He was at an online meetings of wardens with the diocese, and I think they brought up this buddy thing, didn't they, Teddy?
Yes, sir.
And what took place, and what was your reaction to it?
Well, let me, so that you can hear me. What happened was that I think one of the ladies, I'm not going to name which church, said that she is very distraughted, you know, by the way the church is going, and that, you know, what happened was political, and nobody said anything. So, of course, you know me.
Amen.
So I raised, you know, she was saying that, well, she has been in the church for the last maybe 40, 50 years. So I raised my hands, and the canon, you know, recognized me, and I told them that, well, if you are going to claim pedigree, I can go back more than 200 years of Anglicanism in my family, but that's not what gets you into heaven. It's what you do, not your pedigree. And I told her that what Jesus has asked us to do is very simple, and simplicity is what makes it complex. You know, to love God and to love your neighbor like yourself. That's it. But you see, you know, well, that's what some people were doing. They were clapping on it. But where the problem comes is that as human beings, avarice, discrimination, you know, either based on sex, color, or whatever it is, has clouded our judgment in terms of what love means. Love is simple, but it's complex. So, after I spoke that, then a couple of people spoke up that they agree with me, and the canon was saying that. I think personally, and I'm going to say this, I think the bishop in charge of the Episcopalian Church of America, I think what he did was cowardice. Because leadership is tough, you know, and it's usually where you draw the line is when things don't go right. Otherwise, when everything is going right, you don't need a leader. Yeah, people know what they need to do. Yeah. But when you have to split here or things are not clear, that's where you need to stand up. I listened, they gave us the URL to the speech, and I listened to it. All the bishop said is that, Mr. President, we ask that you are merciful because people are, are unhappy and they're afraid. And what she was talking about is what has come to pass, as we can see. And this is just the beginning.
Thank you very much, Teddy. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so proud of your being a warden in this church. That's wonderful. Yeah.
The gentleman said who we're supposed to love, our neighbors, ourselves, and God, and who else? Who did he leave out? That everybody's leaving out today. Our enemies. We're supposed to love our enemies. How hard is it to think about praying for Putin? This is not the first time we've had this conversation in the last 30 days. And my initial thought when the clergy was speaking was I think Putin should have a lightning bolt hit him in the head. And then I realized over 5 or 6 minutes, I'm on the right track, but that's the wrong thing because that's not the way to love your enemies is to kill them. So it is the right way to love Putin, using a lightning bolt. My thought was 3 strikes, 1 in front of him, 1 to each side. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Hopefully the man will see the light. I don't know what else to do.
I think that's
But
what
a lot of people are. We don't know what else to do. And in doing that, that's where the church's leadership really shows up in terms of that. Go ahead.
When I'm like you, I have discovered myself spouting out, which is not something that was typical of me all these years. But in this particular instance, I have heard so many people saying, oh, what a terrible thing to have done from the pulpit. And I said, wait a minute, don't you remember what our president being inducted brought up? He brought up the fact that he was chosen by God. And all she did is say, if you were chosen by God, I would like to remind you of a few things. She was superb in her time. And she said, somebody said to her, do you ever speak to people in the congregation? She said, absolutely. Think about couples getting married. I talk directly to them. Think about, funerals. I talk directly to the family. And in this case, I did not feel that anyone in the press was doing anything to speak to the fact that he felt he was a chosen person of God because he was saved to save the world. Okay, so now one other thing, and then I'm gonna try to behave. And that is that,
Hard, isn't it?
yeah, it is. I have come across, and I'll throw the name out. I've come across Heather Cock Richardson, who I adore listening to. And her latest of January 26th and January 28th, her talks were, we are in a crisis mode now. And she doesn't say that often. She said, we are in a crisis mode, but we still have the power to do things by contacting our senators, our congressmen. And in this case that you've just brought up of this thing going on, everybody should be, she said, the problem is they won't listen to you if you're not in their, district. But a letter will do it, or an email will at least get it in there. And she said, this is the kind, we do have to speak out. And so I'm getting good at it. I sit with my friends and all of a sudden I am talking political stuff. Probably half that I don't know what I'm talking about, but I sure make it sound good. And so this is a person who gives us tools of what we should do, and this has got to be fought right here, what you've just presented.
Like,
We were brought up to don't talk religion,
yeah.
don't talk politics in social gatherings. So we have been indoctrinated from birth to not address these issues. When Steve and I had the bed and breakfast, people would come down in the morning and I would say, at this table, we talk politics, we talk religion, and we can get up and walk away. And you had a good night's rest and you had good meal and we had good fellowship. And people, especially from South, you sit and talk with them over breakfast, you find out you agree with 85%. there's agreement. And so we leave saying, well, okay, if you agree with this, go home and talk to your friends. Tell them your point of view, that you came up north, you talked to a northerner, and lo and behold, we agreed on things. We're not the enemy. And if we can start talking to people in this concept of, you're not my enemy, tell me why you feel this way, and then listen to me when I try to talk to you, and to break this cycle of we don't talk about those things, and to get a little bit more comfortable doing that.
Us doing stuff like this is incredibly helpful because it at least gives us a forum to be able to express.
I hate this.
Mhm.
I mean, and I want to be active. I have never not been active. And the one thing that hit me as almost hopeful is Trump really did do one honest thing.
When he took the oath of office,
Office, that son of a gun did not put his hand on the Bible. That was honest.
It- Let me at least inform you where the diocese has come from on some of this. And then, Jamie, I haven't forgotten you. I'll come right back. What the diocese has done is encourage all the churches in this diocese to familiarize ourselves with the rights of immigrants.
Right, so what?
Immigrants.
Okay.
And especially to immigrants that may be affiliated with our parishes. And that's important because if we don't know, we can't be very supportive. And also a discussion about knowing our rights as a church in the event that ICE comes on our property to detain somebody, of what, we don't have a sanctuary law anymore. This is not a sanctuary. Somebody can come and be safe. And that no longer exists. And so we have to understand what our rights are and what our responsibilities are if in fact that were to take place. And then the third thing that Bishop Dede has tried to really stress is you continue to preach Jesus. Just like Bishop Dede, he was to let you know you preach Jesus. And that everyone is accepted in this place. LGBTQ, black, white, doesn't make any difference. Are accepted here, and we are all equals. We are. And that is just so important. And as we used to have a presiding bishop some years back. He's dead now, God rest his soul. But he used to always say there are no outcasts in the Episcopal Church. Unfortunately, there were outcasts in the Episcopal Church when he said that. But I think at this point, we're much closer to this point of saying there are no outcasts here. There aren't. I mean, people are welcome here as they are. Jamie?
Well, what I have to say ties directly into what you just said about the immigrants. 2 weeks ago, I wasn't at church with you because I was at church with an 85-year-old Anglican minister and his wife in Chester, Vermont. We took in 2 Honduran families 2 years ago. Husbands were both killed in Honduras by drug lords. The 2 women made it to the United States with their three girls. The 3 girls, one of them could only speak English. She was a translator the whole time. And so she's probably 15, 16 years old and wrote an article, I think it's Liberty Magazine, honor student in Chester, Vermont in school, doing very well. And they're living in fear. The family's living in fear. And we don't have to lay down and be walked over. There's a publication called Deportation Defense Manual that my daughter sent me. My daughter is a clinical psychologist in Washington, D.C., and she's got immigrants that are living in fear every minute. They won't leave their houses. They won't answer the door. So this Deportation Defense Manual is by abolishing abolishing citizenship is the website. So that might be helpful if you know people who are living in those kind of conditions, and it's telling what their rights are if an ISIS person, approaches them, and they do have rights. I think unfortunately, if you don't have your green card, you may be in trouble.
Somebody with a green card was just deported 2 weeks ago.
With somebody with a green card?
Green card.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. So
they send the person back to Nigeria and they were like, oh, oops. So you have to fight your way back.
yeah. But this defense manual may be helpful to people that you know.
If you send me the URL for that, and I'll pass that around too.
Yep.
Very, very true. One of the things that I have to say, I got very, I had a heart to heart last night and this morning about one piece of news that I heard that really troubled me, and that was that Musk and his team were given all the codes to get into the United States Treasury system. So,
That
yeah,
was scary.
yeah. And I was frightened. I mean, that really frightened me. And I thought, oh my God, what are they going to do in there? I can't even imagine. And here's where I recognize my own fear. And I had to remind myself, who are you depending on? Not the United States Treasury. I mean, I understand that and how wonderful that is, but my friends, who I'm depending on is far beyond that. Christ and God are, who I need to keep my eyes focused on as all this craziness is going on, so that in fact, I can stay in a good place and keep moving forward in the faith. And that was why I said in the sermon this morning, the one group of people I know of that really can understand this is the Black church. You think, how many years did they survive persecution? It's incredible. And they have a way of understanding where they're at and being able to maintain that faith even in the midst of that craziness. And I thought, and since this is Black History Month, I said, I gotta mention this. This is so important. And then I did what I so often do. I went back and read a little bit of Martin Luther King's sermon. And I went back and read a little bit of Bishop Tutu's sermon. And I got, oh man, I got all fired up. I said, I could preach this morning. I said, well, wait a second. Because one of the things that has been in the news a lot this past is this issue of diversity. And I think Bishop Tutu says it beautifully. He said, if you are against diversity, you are against creation. Because God created diversity. If you didn't have diversity in this world in all kinds of different ways, the world would not exist. You need that diversity. St. Paul used to said, everybody's got a gift and we need one another. We need one another and use their gift in the church. And the same is true in creation. So once you make a step and say, I don't want diversity anymore. I only want uniformity. No diversity is allowed. No diversity is allowed. And we can blame anything we want on diversity because that's the real enemy. My friends, that is not Christianity. That's not Christianity at all. It's the opposite of that. And it's the opposite of what God's calling us to do. And I was just, sometimes I just have to go back and remind them. The other thing that's come up this last week is education. You know, here's the way we're going to deal with LGBTQ people. Here's how we're going to deal with this and with that. And, you know, if you are in a system that is woke, thank God, how can you deny your own history? I mean, that just floors me, especially in Florida. And if you ever want to read a wonderful book, there's a book about the second migration, where the blacks migrate out of the South. It's a marvelous book, eye opener in terms of how the real world is and how they can see that world. And I thought to myself, of all the places in the world that said we're not going to have that kind of open education, is Florida. How does that work again? I don't. It feels to me like, what do they call that in business? A hostile takeover. That's what it feels like. And I say, okay, so how can I respond to that in a way? Yeah, that's loving, absolutely, but in a way also that has justice, which Dr. King always reminded it of. You know, you can't have peace, you can't have love without justice, and so we have to look at that too. Powerful, confusing times. What's that? What's the name of it, John?
Second migration.
Yeah, it's called, I'm sorry? The Warmth of Other Suns. That's the name of it. It is a wonderful book. Well
Another
written.
wonderful book that just came out, that gives you some indication of how the Black,
Not community, how they survived. And it's a book called James.
Oh, really?
it is
Oh, I like to read that.
wonderful. It is
Cool.
absolutely wonderful. It
Percival
is
Everett.
Percival
a
Everett. Okay.
retelling of Huckleberry Finn.
Uh-huh.
From from Jim's perspective.
He's James.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
That's not what I wanted to say, though.
I said all that to get to this.
How do we resist?
Yeah.
You know, it's one thing for
Us to say, okay, we've got to figure out a way to love our enemies and blah, 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 blah. Wonderful. If we're doing that, all we're doing is standing back. I mean, we're just standing back and letting the other side take over.
and
I want to know how to resist.
True. John?
It's hard to know where to begin in the conversation like this.
Oh, yeah.
I agree with virtually everything that's been said so far. It is, I mean, I share a sense of outrage in terms of what's been happening, and also a sense of almost being overwhelmed because so much of this stuff is happening. And that addresses your question too. What can we do about that? And to that, I would say, we do need to look at the local in ways that, become global. I mean, there are issues here in Binghamton that we can address. And I think a couple have just been mentioned already. I think immigration and diversity. On immigration, I would note that the presiding bishop and the president of the House of Deputies had a very powerful statement the day after the inauguration about the whole issue of immigration in particular, with suggestions about what to do. And also, Dee our bishop, has been very strong, saying we have to engage in these things, even if we're being accused of being political, because these issues are so important. And she said after the election, she had parishioners writing in to say, "Oh, our priest got political on this." She said, "I'm absolutely back the priest, in those cases." But what I would say on immigration, first of all, is that the diocese itself has various networking groups working on these things that we could plug into if we wanted to. Secondly, we have the ACA right here, desperately in need, not only with money and goods, and they do need the goods. I guess the cash spigot for supporting the refugees is also dried up. So they need that. They need volunteers. So that's one place that we can really be helpful. And I guess another, would have to do with, things like diversity. Giving a sort of public message on our part, not only diversity of race, but sexual diversity, et cetera, that we need to say, this is where we stand. Do it through forums, do it through our members being engaged in community, et cetera. And of course, any one thing that we try is going to be pretty small. We're not going to solve anything ourselves, but lots and lots of people doing this can make a difference.
Go ahead, Rick.
One of the things that seems overwhelming to me at times is the typical human feeling of, oh no, it's me. What can just little old me do? It was comforting at my place of employment to get a letter from the chancellor of a little company called the State University of New York, which is actually a very big company, that was encouraging and meaningful, and it's public. If you could find that letter, it encourages all of those of us who are working in higher education to do just that, to engage, remain active, and stay within the law. So we're not alone, is the point.
Go ahead, Diane, and then we'll go here and go to Teddy.
The last time I was politically active was when I
Marched when I was in college to free Angela Davis. So it's a long time ago now.
Oh, it wasn't that long ago.
Oh, yes. And I think what's happened is we've become complacent. When you think about our generation, we did help end the Vietnam War.
Yes, we did.
We're all old now, or older, I guess I should say. But we can still overcome, I think, but we have to be unified. We have to have a lot of us together. I think the rules have changed because the rules have changed from on high. And so now I think it's okay to be political when we never did before because we didn't have to. And I think now we need to, and we need to stand up for our faith. And we use Jesus as the foundation of our beliefs. But I think what we need to do is become active again, which I don't want to leave my couch at night, and go out now and in the dark. I don't want to do that, but I think we need to. And I'll just leave you to let you know, there's an organization called indivisible.org. They're here in Binghamton. They're meeting tomorrow night, I think at the Vesta Library. And I think I'm going to make my first appearance in several years there because I haven't been there in a long time. If you go on indivisible.org, you should be able to find, they're also on Facebook. And you should be able to find them there as well.
Thank you very much. Could you send me that URL too? So
I'll send it around.
I'm not sure of the time.
go ahead.
Representatives and Congress people. About 10 years ago, there was an issue with the city of Watkins Glen. The village of Watkins Glen, a group from Texas wanted to turn it into like a nationwide hub for natural gas distribution, which would have changed the character of the Finger Lakes drastically. And there was a lot of local opposition, some of which came from Ithaca College. I personally got involved. I called the governor's office 3 times a week. I wrote letters. I lobbied friends. And in the end, the community won out and the development did not happen. So you can't write a paper letter to anybody in Congress, but you can send an email. They all have places where, but it's true, you have to be in the person's district. Our senators, Schumer and Gillibrand, and then our representatives, you can email them directly. When I was voicing my opposition to the situation in Gaza, I would write the president, the vice president, and Chuck Schumer every day. And I would have a little letter that I changed only 8 or 10 words. But I'd send a different message every day, just slightly different. And when you get it programmed into your computer, it just takes a few clicks. And they really do count. Somebody in their office reads it and keeps track of what people are saying. So I think that's really important. And you don't have to go out at night to do that.
the fact that they backed down after they ended, all the money, and they backed it they backtracked it very quickly. I think that's
Indication of the fact of the kind of voices that need to be heard now. And maybe there will be more backtracking.
Teddy, you've been wanting to say something.
Yes, there's nothing the politicians fear more than voters.
Yeah.
I'm serious. Oftentimes, we do not realize how powerful we are. And usually, when I have a situation where I don't know exactly where I need to go, what I usually go is to go to the organic route. What is one thing that can change the trajectory of what is going on? See, if you get hold, just like you said, if you get hold of your congressman and your senator, send them email. They take a tabulation of it to know what is trending. And they know that, and not just one, if they start seeing that there's a trend of people concerned about something, that is something they pay attention to because they don't want to lose feeding at the trough. You know, they don't want to lose their position. Second thing is that we need to write letters to the bishop and to the presiding bishop to let them know how we feel and where we stand. And when we do that, it's very important that we don't appear to be angry. We are upset and we are disappointed. And we need to write that letter from that perspective so that, there's a logical reason for why we are writing them to make a difference.
Okay.
Having been involved with SUNY for over 30 years, I want to say that lobbying does work. Those of us who always went to Albany and lobbied on Education Day, we always thought, are we being effective? And it is effective to lobby. And I'll keep it brief, but a story I want to tell you that I think you'll find that lobbying works. I had my students at Falling Water in Pennsylvania that Frank Lloyd Wright House built over the waterfalls one Sunday morning on an extended tour. And I saw Hillary Clinton go in the ladies' room. So I said to my female students, I said, girls, that was Hillary Clinton, your past senator for New York State that just went in the ladies' room. Just go over and introduce yourself as SUNY architecture students. So they did. And so then Hillary comes out and she says, oh, you're SUNY students. Let's go sit down. We sat down in a conversation area like this, 30-some students. Hillary Clinton asked every single student in that group what their plans were. Not just skipping over, every single student. So then she looks up at me and she goes, Professor Johnson, what can I do for you? And before I could get it out of my mouth, the students are all saying, we want a 4-year degree in architecture in our school. We want to stay here. We don't want to transfer. So guess who happened to be our convocation speaker at graduation 2 weeks later? Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton's up on the stage at Delhi College with the president and provost. I was a senior faculty member, so I led my colors in with the technology students. And Hillary got up on the podium and said, I'm Hillary Clinton. Oh, and by the way, Delhi College needs a 4-year degree in architecture. I thought the president and provost were going to find a rope and string me off. Lobbying works. It really does. A year later, our 4-year program got dusted off. Systems administration approved the program. Now they have a 5-year Bachelor of Architecture.
Cool.
So it does work to lobby. Yeah.
Along that same line, our governor this week has been extremely vocal. She will not sign an extradition order to extradite a female physician for sending methopristone to a patient in, I think, Louisiana. She has been very vocal about the fact that she will fight ICE. When ICE comes in, especially churches, schools, things of that nature, we need to support our governor because she is taking incredible heat, not only from our Republican representatives within our own state, but from the supreme leader. And I think she just needs to know that people in New York State support her.
Bob?
I would like to know, whatever happened to all this stuff about states' rights? I guess it only goes so far, doesn't it?
Yes, select.
You know, it's like, we're trying to states' rights here, but, oh, no. Goes against the supreme leader, that's null and void.
Is that what we're calling him these days, the supreme leader?
Oh, yeah.
It's not, maybe it should be Hail Trumper.
Yeah,
There's a whole bunch of them.
as long as we don't say Zeke Heil.
No, most of
Coming
that
back
already.
to like immigrants, being sent away. And the fact that the church the church as a whole at this point, we don't have a whole lot that we can do for the immigrants. Okay, like we as a church can't say, okay, we're going to be a refugee place, come because it's not a sanctuary anymore. Right? But I don't know what you do with, and neither does the church know what you do, nor does the government know what you do. If we could use you as the conduit, the Rector's discretionary fund. If there was something that we can do that way, and you could be the conduit.
Well, and the investor can talk
Talk about that, I mean, there are different ways of being able to do that. There are a couple other pieces I wanted to touch on too, and hear what your thoughts were. One of those is healthcare. This is looming, in the distance, but by golly, it's getting closer and closer and closer. I can tell you from one perspective, I've talked to several people who are deathly afraid of losing Medicaid. And then when I heard the Kennedy being interviewed by the congressman and asked him the difference between Medicare and Medicaid, and he didn't know. I thought, my God, why is this guy even?
She doesn't need either. one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so anyway, I'm very concerned because if we stop and think about immigrants, we stop and think about people who are on Medicaid, these are people who are very brittle. I mean, they're living on the edge, and to make them fearful is, there's got to be a way to support them, and to say, somehow, we can support you in the midst of, don't let the fear overwhelm you. I don't know if you guys knew this, but, and I'll just say it. Well, I'm not going to get into that. Never mind. I want to hear what you have to say. No, I don't think so, because I would have to get permission from the person to tell it. So, but because it's really her story, it's not my story. But let me just tell you, if Medicare or Medicaid goes out the window, this person probably won't survive.
Along with 10 million other people.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I
So
think that's
it's very
again
disgusting.
where we bring it back to what people can identify with. So let's take the immigrant population away, because that's a different issue. The nursing homes rely on 50 to 60% of their income
Yep.
from Medicaid. So if Medicaid funding goes away at the federal level, it goes away at the state level. So now your nursing homes within a short period of time will close.
Yeah.
So where's grandma gonna go?
Yeah.
Cause, no, we don't want her. That's why we put her there. We can't. So then we go back to the 1880s where you just have people dead on the streets and we walk over. And I think that becomes the reality of what we paint when we talk about losing Medicaid. Medicare is a little bit different funding. When you start losing funding for Medicare, that impacts a different, little bit healthier of us, reasonably healthy. But to get down to that Medicaid nursing home level is where we need to talk. And we need to paint that picture. Are you comfortable with Broome County nursing homes closing and these people being just put out on the streets?
For those who may not realize Medicaid, let's talk about it. No, she's shy. Because the funding, Medicaid is managed in the state. The state have to pay the money and then they'll get some reimbursement from the federal. So if they get rid of it, it will stop at the state and the money will come from federal.
And the state will go broke because the state can't afford it.
Exactly.
Unless they raise their taxes significantly.
No, they
Well,
don't do that.
that's just not going to happen. So yes, we're back to that.
Go ahead, Bob.
Well, the states that are going to be impacted the most will be the red
Southern
states.
Yeah, exactly.
They're the ones,
Yeah.
I'm sure their coffers are not as good as what we have up here in New York, because I think we have a surplus, don't we? Or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, we pay more taxes than the state.
Yes.
And we are subsidizing.
Yeah, we're subsidizing them. And all those who, just thumb their noses at the blue states, well, hey, we've been carrying you for quite a while.
And the last issue I want to bring up, and then we can kind of open it up a little bit, kind of leads into next week's forum. And that is issues of foreign policy. Whether it's tariffs, whether it's military foreign policy. Did any of you read about the use of our military in Africa just a couple of days ago, attacking an ISIS thing that did whatever, and nobody knew about it.
We bombed them, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I read that.
And
Right. Oh, no.
and then we look at things that are going on around the world. And next Sunday, the forum is going to talk about we're going to talk about the Middle East, correct, John?
Well, it's the refugee issue broadly too.
Oh, it's refugee. Okay, yeah. So I mean, and one feeds into another. I don't even want to talk about Panama. I don't want to talk about Greenland. All that stuff just scares, huh?
Ukraine.
Yeah.
Gaza.
Yeah.
About is that's all a smoke screen for what they're really doing.
Exactly.
And I want to know what they're really.
Exactly.
That's true. Me too, Rick. I'm with you. And it's difficult.
See,
Yeah.
Well, they want to take the dollar, the value of the dollar, and make it all cryptocurrency.
Oh, Lord, have mercy. I don't even understand cryptocurrency. I don't.
I think they want to make sure you don't understand. I think it's a
Right.
scam, to tell you the truth.
Yes.
So how can we be supportive of one another? How can we be people? I mean, we've gotten some pieces of information of websites, things like that could be useful. How can we? I think one of the things we can do is pray for each other, and pray for the church, for the bishops, for all of them. That they have the courage to stand up and say something. One of the things that happens in the Episcopal Church, which is I've never liked it. I don't like it now. Is that one of our hallmarks of this via media is to make sure that we don't offend anybody on either side, and therefore we never make a statement at all. Which is realistically, that's kind of how it happens. And so because you couldn't even make a statement like Teddy did in that meeting where, you can't get everybody's agreement because it's not the way it works, and I think we ought to talk about that in the Episcopal Church. If we're not giving a clear statement, why not? And how can we give a clear statement instead of this ambiguous, oh yeah, well, we're kind of for this, and if you just individually write your representative, that'll be cool. And well, no, it's more than that. It's more than that. We're informed by the pulpit, we're informed by music, we're informed by liturgy, we're informed by what we read. Episcopalians don't tend to be closed-minded people, and so we read a lot of stuff. And how can we share that with each other? I think it would be a wonderful group to start in this church, that perhaps we have some sort of a group where we can communicate with each other in terms of sharing resources or what our thoughts are or what our experiences have been that week. I think that would be wonderful. Maybe put together a list of email and say, here's a group, that you can share with each other. There's nothing wrong with that in the church. So anyway, just as a thought, if you're interested in that, let me know, let John know, because we could do that easily enough.
I'm curious, how many people are on Facebook? Because you can do groups on Facebook. It's what.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You can do private groups too.
Mm-hmm. Sharon?
So it's like a different positionality as a student on an F1 visa, which is very different. When all of you guys are so let me tell you where I'm coming from, which is I come from a place where, you don't want to, you're angry and you are outraged at everything that is going around, but at the same time, you feel a little helpless because you don't want to do things that jeopardize your future. That's where I come from. And being a student, most of the circles that I am in also are mostly students or similar people. And you feel alone and, you don't feel like you have any strength. But sitting today, I want to say over here today is one of the first times I felt that sense of community. And I'm so grateful. And just listening to you, ma'am, I don't know your name, but just knowing that we have done this and overcome this in the past is just very hopeful. And I think a lot of us just needed that, and I needed that for sure.
Anybody know where the Broome County Council of Churches still an active organization?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
They
sure.
are.
So then secondly, how can we get with the Council of Churches to specifically look at the ACA issues?
That, if nothing else, again, getting
A group of churches who say, we commit to supporting our immigrants.
That's a good idea. I can do that with an email to say, how can we be supportive, and perhaps
but
we
again,
could get
pulling
Them into whatever type of group we start to put together here and getting like-minded people, but let Trinity be the hub for pushing this forward.
I do think your idea of having us contact you or John with organizations that we know of, because another thing that I've been hearing is don't try to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
Find out what is out there and
Right.
join up with them. Yeah.
Go ahead, Teddy.
And I think one of the things that Glenn is saying, people who may be overwhelmed, people who may be, in fear, people who may be angry, you are not alone. And what you're experiencing is not you. is caused by an external event or environmental situation. So once you realize it's not you overreacting and you are not alone, that should take an edge off of things.
Yes, because he did not receive a mandate. It was practically a 50-50 election. So you know that 50% of the population is experiencing what we're experiencing.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of getting organized and having a voice.
Go ahead. Oh, yeah, Ken.
Might be a bit of help to us to realize that this was the intent all along.
Yeah.
The current administration's plan was to have shock and awe from day one,
And pain.
to get people on their back foot and to feel disoriented and primarily overwhelmed, so as to not have an effective response. So it's had its intended effect, but things will settle in and more opposition will grow, I'm sure. But it might be of some help to know this was the intent.
Hitler did it in 53 days.
Yeah.
And he's doing it so fast too.
Bob and then John.
Going off on a slight little tangent, not too much. 2 years ago, when we lived in Southern California, right after the Grand Poobah High Potentate first got elected, we went to the Women's March in Los Angeles. And there were like 700,000 and all this, but what really surprised me when you go in marching, it felt so good. You know, and not only then, afterwards too. So I was just, and he just, I would just throw that in there in case somebody said, well, I don't march. But it does do something to you.
Yeah. Sure happened in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah. I'm very encouraged by a lot of the ideas that have been coming out here. People are passionate and interested, and I think that we have energy that can be followed up on. Just a few thoughts about specifics. One is just, I think it's important that we support Governor Hochul. I think that when if you live in Binghamton, then all your representatives are Democrats who are not going to be happy with Trump. But it's important to let them know that you are supporting what they're trying to do, especially on particular issues. Key vote is coming up in Congress. Let Schumer know that this is important. So I think that that's important. I think the church, I love this idea. If there's enough interest to have a group that would be connected at least by email, to talk about what they're doing and to have a conversation about that. I think that there may be times when a statement by the vestry might be appropriate if it, for example, related to ACA or something. We're not going to say, go vote for so-and-so, but we can say these are issues that are really important to us as a church. And I guess one other thing to throw out, because this is a forum, would it make sense, for example, come May or so, to have another forum where we revisit these things, from the vantage point of several more months? Is that, we've not put that into our schedule, but maybe kind of energy in this room would be nice to continue on.
Yeah.
I see people nodding their heads at least.
I just want to thank you all for coming and thank you all for sharing your wisdom and your experiences. Go for it, Daniel.
Right. So I was thinking, I think I should say something. Because I have a lot to say, but so
go for it, man.
I graduated in 2020 at Seton Catholic Central. During COVID, the uproar from a lot of Black men and women dying, and against the wishes of my parents, I went with some friends to protest, from May to July and August.
It was frontline.
Not really, but it's a lot. So, I witnessed firsthand seeing a crowd of thousands of people dwindle to hundreds, to less than 100, to 50, to sometimes 20. and I mean, I was there, to be an eyewitness to, what, happened in the 60s, 70s. But yeah, the momentum died, and I couldn't figure out why. So, I mean, I was very confused for a while. But I'm now graduating from college from public Ivy, you know, written by Forbes. So it's a really good school. And yeah, so I did some work in canvassing for city council, for Senator Leah Webb. I was an intern for her. And what I learned, at least in Endicott, is that Broome County, this area, the Triple Cities, has a big history. There was even an airport in Endicott. I learned a lot about the history of this area. And I don't think that people hate each other. I think they're scared, and just having very cordial conversations with people who've had 4 generations of family in this town. There might not seem to be diversity in Binghamton, especially at my school. Maybe 1 out of 10 Black people out of maybe 400 students. But since 4th grade, in the South, I was in school in Texas. I've been used to it, and it's been hard. But I realized you can turn your pain into something beautiful. So, what I was thinking of for canvassing, yes, I think I made a difference in local politics, though I don't really like politics. And also mission and ministry. Mission and ministry, we've done a lot for the local community. We got even a grant for the ACA. We gave them $5,000, and then we got a grant from the diocese of $5,000 that covered that cost. That was eye-opening for me to be able to witness that change, and given that I'm at the start of my professional life, what I can do, learn from that. But also this area in terms of diversity, Harriet Tubman, with her Freedom Trail, or her Underground Railroad, Binghamton was actually one of those focal points, and had like Frederick Douglass speak at local Black churches here, way back when. Before all of our time. So the Black tradition in church is a real part of Binghamton's history. And actually, luckily, my roommate, my high school friend, Micaiah's, his mom, Dr. Bailey, she organized the Freedom Trail, that has its grand opening, I think March 21st, of the statue and everything. And when I went to the other event for that Freedom Trail around a year ago, what I noticed, what made me actually happy for the first time, and actually have hope, in this crazy world, is the children. The children, I think that is where we're gonna have our hope. Martin Luther King III actually spoke. I saw him speak last Wednesday, and he didn't talk to me. I wish he did. I shook his hand when I got the book, but he talked to other BU kids, and he had a lot of hope for our future. I think that means something, not only that he's still continuing the tradition of his father, but also the fact that Binghamton University, the public Ivy, was also able to get someone like Martin Luther King III, someone of his pedigree, to come to little old Binghamton. Because before Binghamton, I thought it was like Birmingham. I didn't even, before we moved here in 2016, I didn't know anything. And the longer I've been here, we are a central hub, I think, in not just the US, but in the world now. And it's a big cultural change. Martin Luther King III talked about the kind of shift that's happening, especially with in demographically, the white population is slowly going to become the minority. And I don't know what that means. He didn't know. He was like, I don't know what that means. But things are changing. And to embrace change is something that I think Christians have had to do throughout the world. And yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to be hopeful for, especially in this church. And I'm really happy to be a member in this church. All these
Happy you are too, Daniel. Thank you all for coming. I hope you have a wonderful day.